Welcome to the CDFA Hotline. My name is Kristen Sharon, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. My guest is Monica Scoldieri, and Monica has written a book called Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence. And her journey began when she went through her own divorce. She was a newly minted single parent, newly unemployed, and $257,000 in debt. And she, after several years of going through several job transitions, she was able to obtain financial independence. And Grab Your Slice of Financial Independence, which is her book, shares not only the story of how she went from financial devastation to financial independence, but she also shares the steps so that you can too. So we're really excited for her to be with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Kristen, it's a complete pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And what a great introduction. Thank you.
The purpose of our show is to provide general information as it relates to divorce and to showcase how certified divorce financial analyst professionals can help you. While we will be answering questions about divorce and finances, we cannot offer personalized financial or legal advice. The reason for this is because every divorce situation is so specific. There are many factors that may impact your particular situation, such as state-specific statutes and guidelines. We're going to answer questions generally and hope to steer you towards some resources, information, and professionals that can help you. But nothing you hear on this show today should be construed as legal advice, financial advice, or tax advice. And I really can't emphasize this enough. Please do not consider anything you hear on the show today as a reason not to seek professional advice that is specific to your individual situation. As geographical areas, and there are many different factors that can impact your particular situation. So this show is educational, it's not advisory. We do, however, hope to provide you with some great information and resources to point you in the right direction. So we have several questions for you today, since you are someone that is a financial coach and that you have a great deal of experience not only in debt situations, but also with working with single parents. So Sharon wants to know, I just got divorced and I'm suddenly living on one income. How do I figure out what expenses to cut without making my kids feel deprived?
Right. And that is a fantastic question and very, very common. A lot of people that come to me, that's usually the time when they're at the tail end of the divorce or they just went through it and they are ready to figure out the next phase of how do you do that. And I 100% agree with you, Kristen. Every situation is different, and everybody's in a different phase of life. And so, for something for a newly minted single mom, the first thing I did was I took out a piece of paper and I actually wrote out. I had to be brutally honest with myself about what assets I have and what liabilities I have. So the list of all of the debt, the list of whatever assets I have, the little that I had left. So I had the marital debt of the $257,000, and I broke out what that meant. And then the second thing I did was I started looking at my cash flow. And when I say cash flow, when I work with people, they don't really know because they don't put a budget together. But to put a budget together, you have to look at your cash flow. And so looking at where your money is going and organizing those expenses into categories and grouping them so that you have an idea of where your money is going. And then think about how that spend, how did that add value to your life? And so from there, you can start having that conversation with yourself to figure out where should the money go? Do I really need to spend $400 a month going out to a restaurant? Do I remember all of those meals? Did it add any value to my life? And having those types of conversations internally, and then figuring out how do you move money between categories. And after you do that for a few months, you can start to build a budget off of that because no 2 months look alike. And especially in the beginning, when you're just trying to figure things out, you need to give yourself a lot of leeway to see how it all kind of comes together and where you can make cuts that make sense for your family.
Do you have any advice on how to have these conversations with your children? I mean, I feel like a lot of newly divorced single parents do need to have conversations with their children about these lifestyle changes, but you also don't want to worry them. So
Right.
how do you have any advice on how you have that conversation?
Yeah, so my kids were really young. They were 3 and 5 when we went through the divorce. And at first, they didn't really understand because their dad traveled weekly. So to them, it almost wasn't different until the holidays rolled around. And then they were like, well, wait a minute, why aren't we all together? And so the conversations, obviously it depends on their age. But I will say that kids are amazingly resilient. I would say to have the conversation, you never badmouth, no matter what the situation is, you would never want to badmouth the other person. Keep that between the two of you and focus on what the kids need, having the conversations with them. And I would also say that, make it a team effort. Like, I still love you, your dad still loves you, we are a team in this house, and this is how we're going to pull together to make things work. And giving them things to do so that they feel like they have skin in the game. They have a say in what's happening. And so that they know that this has nothing to do with them, but it's just something that happens sometimes. And then getting them some support that they might need. My kids were lucky enough to have a support group at the elementary school when they got to that point. And so that was really helpful to them. But definitely, giving them chores to do, explaining how things are going. And you don't, it's interesting. You really don't need a lot of money to enjoy each other's company. A movie night with some popcorn, or we used to do Wednesday night pizza at the park, build some nice memories. When it was in the summertime and it was crazy hot outside, we would go to the bookstore, and because my kids were big readers. And so, if they behaved themselves, I would say they could get, like one book each, kind of thing. And so, just finding little ways to make it so that you are a team. Always keep the communication lines open. Sometimes it's hard to hear some of the things they have to say, but it's really important that they feel comfortable to be able to come to you and just say what's really on their mind in a respectful way. So those things can go a really long way.
I love that. That's great advice. Okay, Stephen wants to know if debt consolidation loans are a good idea for single parents having recently gone through a divorce. And I think this is a really, really common question for a lot of people in this situation.
Yeah, I've had people ask me anything from should I file for bankruptcy, and should I file for a consolidated loan? Should I, that is a really highly specific situation. So, most of the time when I work with people, we find that there are other strategies that we can use before we get to a debt consolidation. I would definitely look into the background and find out if, the reputation of the companies you want to work with, make sure it comes from a resource that you trust. That is really important. But you would be surprised. Sometimes you can just call the creditors and negotiate a different rate if you have money. That they would rather, instead, if they don't get their 7,000, but you have 5,000, you can pay it all off. Sometimes they're willing to do that, and so you'd save yourself $2,000. As an example. But a lot of times it's not necessarily the go-to move. Neither is bankruptcy. It really, I mean, they all have their pros and cons. But I would say the one thing about a consolidated loan that I would very much caution people on, and that is that you may have, before the consolidated loan, let's say $2,000 a month that's crushing you in debt that you have to pay. And so if you do this consolidated loan, it brings it down to $1,000 a month. And that sounds really enticing. And maybe you're paying that for 10 years or whatever the situation. But a lot of times what ends up happening is that you're not addressing the underlying symptoms, the actual problems, and that is your spending, your habits. And because then it turns into, oh, well, now I'm saving $1,000 a month. And so now you're going out to dinner and going to a show and doing this with your friends and buying clothes. And then you're in a worse position than when you just consolidated the debt. So that's why I'm very, very hesitant when I work with somebody to say yes. We have a lot of conversations before we even get to a debt consolidation situation. So that's my cautionary tale on that.
Good advice. Okay, Andre wants to know, how do I save for my kids' college when I can barely pay my bills now?
Uh, I get a lot of, I can barely pay my bills, I can't afford. And so, first thing, again, I would caution on language of I can barely pay my bills, I can't afford type of language because it kind of cuts your own self. You're cutting your legs out from underneath you. And I truly believe that you can afford anything, but you cannot afford everything at the same time. And so the younger your kids are, putting even $25 per paycheck per kid in a 529 can, when they're young, can do a lot of things for kids. So that is something I would recommend highly to do that. But if you really are you're stretched and you're barely making it, um, you're getting older. Your retirement, your financial independence, I would say, is more important than putting money aside for college because you can get loans for college if they decide to go, but you cannot get loans for retirement and when you get older. And I tell my kids, we're fortunate. I can help them a lot with their college, but I tell them that I can't do everything for you. And so I would rather help you out a little bit, but then be financially independent because otherwise I will pay for your college, but then I'm going to move in with you. And so when I say it like that, the kids are like, no, 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 you don't need to do everything. We can get loans and whatnot, So, but having the open conversation to explain to them, like these are the pros and cons to this situation. It's not a requirement for parents to pay for college. And I know I'm probably going to shock a bunch of people when I say that, but it's true. You cannot fund your retirement. And I don't think it's selfish to think about that, especially if you're starting late or you're struggling.
I completely agree. And I often tell my clients, it doesn't make any sense for you to put expenses on a credit card when your child can probably get a student loan for less interest than you would be paying on that credit card. And additionally, I think that if children know early enough that there's not
Hmm.
going to be assistance for college, they are potentially more motivated to seek out those scholarship opportunities, maybe be more potentially motivated to, excel at an instrument or an activity that might get them a scholarship. And so again, you're completely right. And that I think newly divorced parents don't feel comfortable prioritizing themselves.
Yes. Yeah, because I mean, you're going through the divorce. You are probably feeling guilty that the marriage, the family unit has now broken up and that there's no stability and that the kids pay for that. And whatever the circumstance, guilt is never a reason to do something. Fear is never a reason to do something or not do something, but to really think about it and what is best long term. Making decisions for short term for a long-term problem or situation is never going to work, And so, yeah, absolutely. Just, think about your motivation. I mean, if you can put money aside in a 529, and I don't know, most people cannot pay for 4 years of university for students. It's gotten to be so expensive. But yeah, I mean, let them be. I think having skin in the game for most people, there's a sense of pride to that, and I wouldn't want to rob my kids of having that, and I mean, I think parents should think about that.
Okay, Taryn says, my credit score took a hit during my divorce. How do I rebuild it?
Yeah. So just, paying, of course, paying your bills on time and in full goes a long way. That's probably the quickest way to get your credit score back up. And, if you aren't in the process of buying a car where you need a loan or you're trying to refinance your house, just hold off on those types of things and take the time. But those are the two fastest ways. Don't open and close credit cards, like those types of things, they seem small. And the last thing I'll say is definitely pull your credit history. And once the divorce is over, pull your credit history from all three of the credit companies that are out there, the top three, and verify that everything that is on there is in fact yours, because it's very easy for these mistakes to happen. And so as soon as you find something, make sure you put in a dispute with that company and start recording what was the conversation, when you had it, what time was it, who you spoke to, and document everything. Make sure you put a formal letter. They'll tell you the process. Believe it's just a formal letter, something, some kind of documentation proving that that is not yours. And that will also be another quick and easy way to help your credit score.
Is it possible to invest for the future when I'm living paycheck to paycheck?
Yes, yes, it is. Because I went through unemployment 3 times. So, unemployed for 2 years with 2 kids, a house that I couldn't afford to downsize or sell. And it took me 10 years to not only get out of debt, but to reach financial independence. And I do believe it goes back to what is really most important to you. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, I would say take a step back and look at where your money is going, because money is like children. If you're not paying attention to it, it's going to go off and get into trouble. So definitely take some time. And it's hard. It's so hard. It's, because you think the worst. But then when you see where your money is going, it's very empowering to know how much is going to which category, and that tells you that where you can move things around that make the most sense. And getting rid of credit card debt, especially when you're looking at 15, 20, I saw one person had 29.99% interest. You get rid of those types of things, those high interest cards, that's a 30% savings right there. You're giving yourself a 30% raise right there. But really look at, because it really all starts with the day-to-day stuff, and look at where your money goes and just move things around. It's like these little things that can really make a difference. You'd be surprised how quickly you'll get out of that paycheck to paycheck mode.
Lee wants to know how you stay motivated to pay off debt and to get ahead financially after your divorce when you're so overwhelmed, everything feels out of control. How do you stay motivated to stay that path?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, a lot of people don't really think about that, but it is emotionally draining. Going through divorce, even under the best of circumstances, can be emotionally draining. And the best thing I could tell you is to look at what debt you have, look at the interest rates for each of them, make a plan as to how you're going to tackle it. So for people that are very instant gratification motivated, go with the smallest amount first and just knock that out. And then your list gets a little shorter and you feel like you've accomplished something. For those that are trying to knock off the largest interest rate and they're just looking to save money over the long run, sort things out according to the highest interest rate and start knocking that down. And if you just keep track of it ever at the end of each month, at how much your debt went from 25,000 to 22,000 to 20, you can start to see, and that can be motivating for you to keep moving forward. So that's what I would say.
That is really great advice. Now, how do people go about finding a financial coach and paying for a financial coach when they don't have the funds to
Yeah.
to live? It's such a dichotomy where you really need this financial guidance and this financial help, but you're really in a situation where it's such a struggle to pay for it. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes, I get that question often. How can you charge people when you know they're in dire straits? And my answer to that is when you hire a financial coach, and just like, advisors and tax accountants, we're all different. We have different niches and different strengths. But when you hire somebody like a coach, you're investing in yourself. And the money what you learn about your own finances and your own habits, you'll get that money back, and you will get that money back dividends over years. It is life changing to work with a fitness coach, a health coach. If you do what they tell you to do, what you hired them for, you can change the trajectory, not only for yourself, but for your kids and the way they handle money and for future generations. So that's first. And the second thing I would say is you would be amazed at how quickly I could find my fee in a month when I look at how you're spending money. And it's not to say, because a lot of people they always laugh when I say that, but It's not because I'm going to say, oh, you're on rice and beans for the next 30 days and you can't go out and there's no fun. It's not that. I absolutely am 150% about having fun and joy in your life. But every person I work with, I have yet to find someone who knows that their budget is based on what they're spending. And it's not that, when you're in debt and you're going through a hard time, you go out to eat, they bring you the bill, you're not going to say, oh, well, why are you charging me? I don't have any money to pay this. Why are you charging me? When you go to the grocery store or buy yourself an outfit or a pair of shoes or makeup, get your hair done, you never say, oh, I don't have any money to pay that. All of those things, they're going to feed you once, get your hair done once, you're going to have this outfit for a few days. But the coaching that you get will give you that money back every single month. And it will come in dividends as you invest that money and work with a financial advisor to figure out what makes sense for you in your stage of life and your risk tolerance.
Well,
So that's my answer.
no, I mean, that's great advice. I think that, people going through a divorce, if they can just recognize that there are professionals out there, such as certified divorce financial analysts, therapists, coaches, that have been through these situations over and over and over again. And if you were to get a new job skill at work, they would give you training on
Mhm.
how to perform that job skill. And people go through divorce and they don't get any training. They don't get any assistance. They don't get any help as to how to get through this and how to come out the other side financially independent. And so, it's definitely a learning process. And people don't have to go through it alone.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a lot of women that come to me after divorce and they're doing everything and they're doing everything by themselves. There's just people just don't have friends that understand. And so working with me, they feel like they have somebody that can share the load,
Mhm.
non-judgmental. I'm empathetic because I have been through the same situation with six-figure debt, and I was able to come out and do that. And so they already know and trust me on that, and I'm empathetic. Just like there are coaches who work with married couples only, and because that is their strength, that's what they can speak to and it's just it's really important that you can find somebody that you can work with. And I mean, with chat gpt you can search for people that are locally near you. There are coaching organizations that you can search and look into and find some people there. I mean, there's no shortage of people to, but I would also say interview two or three coaches so that you find the fit of somebody that you connect with, that you can work with. So that's the other thing I'll say is, don't just stay with even when people come to me, I often encourage them to, and I'll even give them names to talk to other people just to see, is this the right fit? So
Yeah, I think, especially for single parents, they come out of a divorce and they just feel such a need to hold themselves up as strongly for their children. And it's
yeah,
okay to have somebody on your team that you can go to. And there's a lot of shame around money,
there is.
money problems. There's some stigma around it. And so to have somebody to talk to and really force them to look at it objectively to make good financial decisions for their future coming out of a divorce, I think can be life altering.
Oh, 100%. I mean, and the shame and guilt, that's very real. A lot of people feel that way. I've actually had two doctors that I worked with because a lot of people think, financial coach, that's for people that, don't have any money and they make a small paycheck. But I've had doctors that make a nice salary and they still can't figure out how to get their finances. So, just because you're good at your job doesn't necessarily mean you know how to handle your finances. I mean, and I went through the same thing when I went through the divorce. It was crushing and demoralizing. I sat there going, I'm college educated, I speak English, have had jobs, I'm raising kids, I bought a house. I don't understand why this is so elusive.
Mhm.
But we're not taught it, and we live in a consumer society where that is what's rewarded and looking at the Joneses and keeping up with them. And that is completely unnecessary. There can be a lot of happiness and joy in the smallest of things in life. And, you know, when you're so focused on putting a pool in the backyard or taking this 5-star vacation, you're missing all these wonderful things that happen on a daily basis that are really wonderful, you know. So,
That's
yeah.
amazing. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your time, and I think that this advice is going to be invaluable for our listeners today.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun, and I hope that that not only the people that ask the questions, but I hope others that are listening to this get a lot of value out of it.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put a link to Monica's book below, but you can find her at www.grabyourslice.com and check out her book. And it was wonderful having you with us today. See you guys in the next episode.